Hello and welcome to Mental Awakening, the podcast that explores all topics related to trauma recovery, mental health, chronic pain, and healing. I'm your host, Sarah DeKeely, psychotherapist and mental health social worker, and in this episode, I will speak about personal power. What is personal power? How do we give our power away? And what does it look like to own your power? Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of this podcast with me. I chose today's topic because I really believe that when it comes to growth, when it comes to healing, we're not here to just live in our survival mind. We're actually here to evolve, to expand in consciousness. And so I want to talk a little bit about my understanding of personal power so far in my life and why that's so important on this path of healing and growth. I have come to believe that we all have power, that we're actually born with it. And this might be a new idea, a new concept for some people, but if you know about my background and my story, I'll just briefly share that I grew up in some pretty extreme circumstances. I grew up in a country that was a war zone or at war, and I was a refugee child. I've lived in refugee camps. I've had some very extreme experiences in my life as a child, as a young adult, and so on. So you could say that I was very powerless in those situations, in the circumstances that I was born into, as well as a lot of the different things that have happened throughout my life. I know what it means to be completely powerless. I have felt it. I have lived it from pretty much the moment I was born into this world, because there was so much suffering in the home that I was born into, the culture that I was born into, the country that I was born into. And a lot of that continued throughout my life into my young adult years, and I really have come to know what is powerlessness, what it means, what it feels like. And so to go from that to where I am today, where I actually do really feel so much more in power and, feel very much connected to my personal power, it's no wonder that I really do believe that we have power, that we're born with it. And I think often we get disconnected from it because over the years, we become accustomed to doing what others expect of us, to think that we have very little choice. And we end up settling for a life or into a life that is less than wonderful and amazing and peaceful. Now, everyone's definition of success is different. For me, success has come to mean inner peace. It's when I can actually live in a state of appreciation, a state of peace, a state of joy, a state where I'm no longer seeing myself as a victim of what happens to me, but rather as someone who is here to just basically enjoy, appreciate, explore, create, as well as give back. And that's how I see success now, right? So when you settle for a life that is less than what you believe to be successful, then you can feel powerless or feel disconnected from your own personal power. And the reason for that is because when we are spiritually asleep and we're living in those lower states of consciousness, we unconsciously give our inner power away. But as we awaken and move into higher states of consciousness or deeper states of consciousness, that's when we begin to own our power. And knowing this makes it possible to accelerate our awakening. So by owning your power and not giving it away, you become a more awakened person. And that's when your life really does start to shift, because your reality will become a direct reflection of what's actually happening inside of you, because it's all energy, it's all frequency. And this is something that I never used to understand. I used to think it's mumbo jumbo talk. And now it's so wonderful and refreshing to really get it, that everything is energy. You can't trick yourself. You can't trick your brain. You can't trick others. It's all about your energy. It's all about what frequency you're vibrating in. Are you living in the frequency of fear? Are you living in the frequency of love? Because ultimately, it always comes down to these two frequencies. In my work with clients, I usually take people through things like inner child healing and an inner child work, becoming aware of their subconscious. I take them through things like reparenting and implementing boundaries. But eventually, that individual has to make a decision. Do I want to live my life from this place of, having this trauma and the past always driving me and leading me forward, and living my life as that individual who had all these things that happened to him or her or they? Or am I living my life from the present moment, where everything that happened to me in the past is no longer relevant? It's something that happened in the past. It's what contributed to how I've turned out and what's contributed to my conditioning. But as I'm healing that, as I'm evolving, as I'm waking up to that, as I'm repeatedly shedding love and light on all of these parts of myself, then there's no need to actually have such rigid boundaries. There's no need to constantly, live in that mindset that look at what's happened to me and look at, what I've been through. There's no need to go to the past. There's no need to compare. There's no need to react to any of the triggers, because you can just repeatedly become this container for them, this container of just, a space holder for yourself. Just as I hold space for my clients, I support them in really getting a taste of what it means to become a container for themselves, to be that space holder for themselves. However, when we choose to stay in these lower states of consciousness, we end up giving our power away. And we do that by becoming the victim, or thinking that we are the victim of what's happening to us or what's happened to us. We do that by always looking for acknowledgement from others. We do that by arguing, scolding, criticizing, trying to get that attention, trying to be heard. And it's almost like we're constantly driven by that inner child. I want to clarify that in a therapeutic context, this is different. We definitely need validation. We definitely need to be heard. We definitely need to be acknowledged. But at some point, we also have to move beyond that. And that's what I'm talking about. One of the things I learned as I was doing the training with Gabor Mate, who's a trauma expert and has done incredible work in this area, was that he mentioned the importance of encouraging 100% responsibility for the client's actions. He really encouraged us to continue to bring the issues that the client is bringing up back to them, to really focus on supporting the client, to understand that I'm not doing them any favors if I validate their victimization story. I can be empathic, I can validate their pain, I can validate their hurt and their fear and their emotions, but the story or interpretation of that story is what we need to be mindful of, is what we need to change. And I've had people who've come and seen me for a couple of sessions who've become very triggered, very angry, not wanting to take responsibility, not wanting to see this truth, attacking me. Because it's a very difficult thing for some people to own. It's a very difficult thing for some people to actually take ownership of. But it's so, so important for our healing, for our personal power. I love this saying by Sadhguru, who is an incredible yogi, and he says, if terrible things have happened to you, you are to have grown wiser. If the worst things have befallen you, you should be the wisest of the lot. But instead of going wise, most people have become wounded. You know, the most horrific things in life, from my experience, can be a source of nourishment if you accept that I am responsible for the way that I am, and it's possible to transform that adversity into growth. You know, in a state of conscious response, which is what happens in a therapeutic setting, it's possible to really use every life situation as an opportunity for growth. But if you habitually think that I am the way I am because of someone else, because of what happened to me when I was younger, because of what happened to me, because of my circumstances, then you're using life situations as an opportunity for self-destruction and stagnation. And I really can't stress this enough, that self-responsibility is key here. And it doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that you caused something. It doesn't mean that, you know, it was your fault. Nor does it mean that whatever happened to you was okay. It means that you can respond in the present moment to whatever is happening. It's responsibility. And how do we do that? You know, how do we become a person who can respond to life from this present moment? Well, we definitely need insight, right? Because insight can really help us to recognize what's happening, what has happened. But we also need to translate insight into action for it to be effective. And then also to execute that action. You know, especially action that opposes an old belief, that invites you to respond differently to life. And so I always say to strengthen that part of you that's not the victim. Once a day, write down when you were strong, or when you were present, or when you were not a victim. Remind yourself of the times when you have been in your personal power. When there is this knowing inside of you that it's okay, I can be with what's hard inside of myself, and I can really be that space holder for myself, I can return back to a place of compassion and love, then there's no need to try and prove it, right? So you become much more comfortable with yourself. There's a confidence that begins to arise from within, that isn't dependent on what someone else does or what someone else says or doesn't say, and so on. So yes, you can express yourself, you can ask for what you want, you can ask for what you need. But if the other person still doesn't give that to you, or the world doesn't give that to you, or your current situation and reality isn't reflective of what it is that you're actually wanting, needing, and so on, then sitting with that grief, processing that grief, feeling it whenever it arises and letting it go is an example of tapping into your personal power. It means that I am taking ownership for everything that's arising inside of me. I'm not looking to be saved, rescued, and fixed. I'm actually taking complete responsibility for that, for my inner world, even if what's reflecting back to me isn't always something that I can even make sense of. Because of course, as we evolve, as we expand, as we grow, there's so many things we discover and realize about ourselves. And a lot of that isn't necessarily pretty, right? And so it takes a lot of courage to be on this path. I've said that many times before. It takes a lot of courage to be on the path of, I guess, growth, evolution, and expansion. Whether we believe it or not, whether we like it or not, we're all on this path of evolution. It's just that some people really embrace that path and they really want to go all in and they tend to go quite far, and others not so much. So personal power means that you are conscious enough that you know that you're responsible for everything that you experience in your reality. You're never a victim to any person or situation because you're co-creating. You're literally co-creating every experience that you have with your beliefs, with your thoughts, with your energy. To avoid any misunderstandings, I just want to clarify that yes, we do get victimized. People do horrible things and have done horrible things. And some people have gone through, really horrific events in their lives where trauma was invoked by someone close to them. And so it's not about not having been victimized. It's about no longer being the victim of what's happened to you. Because often we can just wait around and repeatedly want acknowledgement from the people that have invoked that trauma or that pain, or the people that are close to us, family members and so on. And you may wait around your entire life and never get that acknowledgement. Because acknowledgement, even though it's a necessary part of healing, and I always say trauma does require acknowledgement. It's something that can come from a professional. It can come from people who are considered to be the safe people in your life. But if you're thinking that you're going to get that from the people who actually invoked you pain, it may never happen. And that can keep you in that state of victimhood. So it's important to sit with the grief that comes up around the fact that you may never receive that from those people. And that your personal power always will come from inside of you. Because often you just need to acknowledge yourself. Once someone else acknowledges you, which often happens in a therapeutic setting with a professional, then it's just a matter of you acknowledging yourself. And that's pretty much what you really need. But when we are constantly waiting and wanting the acknowledgement of other people, that's going to steer us further away from our personal power. Having said that, if you're in a situation where, let's say something's happened to you, you're with family members who deny that, who deny your reality. In that moment, you can tap into your own power and just say, this is what happened to me. I don't need anyone's approval here or acknowledgement. I know what's happened to me, and what happened was not right, and it's not okay. And you can suppress it all you want, but I know what I went through. And speaking up and expressing that truth is also a way of tapping into your personal power. Because just because other people are denying your reality doesn't mean that you have to deny your own reality. I believe that when you really take full responsibility for everything that has happened to you or is happening to you and who you are, and you don't play the victim, you don't think like a victim, that's when you can actually really start to tap into your personal power. I want to just briefly bring up some universal beliefs, because beliefs are incredibly powerful. They're basically thoughts, repeated thoughts that we have been thinking or that we have picked up from our environment, from culture, society, the people we grew up with, what was mirrored to us, and so on. And so some of these universal beliefs are: people should respect me. I need more money. Life isn't fair. I can't do anything right. I need to make a decision. I should be different. People shouldn't be angry. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I need to be in control. I have to work hard. People are judging me. The world isn't a safe place. I did it wrong. I need to do it right. I know what's best for others. My body should be healthy. Conversation about money, the fact that I can't afford it, which I hear quite often, or even conversations about relationships. It's hard to meet someone great out there. Conversations about your health, thoughts about that. This is never going to get better. This is something I have to live with forever. Even though those things may be the case, as long as there's an attachment to those beliefs and those thoughts, it's going to be really difficult to have a different experience. to have a different reality. For example, in the case of money, finding another job or finding other ways of making an income will require you to make sacrifices that you may not want to make. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't want to make those sacrifices. And so they just keep repeating, I don't have money. Well, you can go and work in McDonald's. I don't want to work in McDonald's. I don't have any money. And it's like, well, if you went and worked in McDonald's, even though it's not your dream job, you would actually take your power back because you wouldn't be playing a victim to what's happening to you. So the way we give our power away is through any emotion that is the result of believing that someone has taken something from you or has something you need. We tend to give our power away when we have something important that we want to tell someone, or when we want to express our feelings but feel that it's too risky to make ourselves heard, when we don't speak our truth. We give our power away when we believe well-meaning friends and people around us and their opinions on what we can handle or what we can't handle, when we're looking for answers from others over and over again, as opposed to trusting ourselves, listening to ourselves, sitting with ourselves, tuning into ourselves. Can you see now why personal power is so important for growth, for consciousness, for expansion, for inner peace, for strength, for resilience, for self-actualization, and a relationship with ourselves where we can feel centered, we can feel whole? I also want to mention some other things that are ways that we can give our power away that just came to mind. When we try to avoid criticism, we actually end up opting out of opportunities. And I think criticism is really important, or even just feedback in general, or even triggers that may show up, because these are ways that we can get to really understand ourselves. These are ways that we can, dive deeper into ourselves. These are ways that we can negotiate, opportunities for us to even reflect. Does this speak true to me? The feedback that this person is giving me, is that benefiting me? Is that something I really need to look at? And if there's a reaction, if there's a trigger, often it means that yes, there's something there for you to look at. And that's a gift. So when we avoid criticism, we're actually steering away from our personal power instead of tapping into it. Because avoiding criticism or feedback of any kind just keeps us from really growing or taking action sometimes in our lives. The other thing that also just now came to mind is when we're waiting for permission from someone else to do what we feel is right for ourselves. I know I briefly mentioned that a bit earlier, but the amount of times I've done that in my life where I've focused on what someone else is telling me, and I've gone and I've read endless books and gone and visited endless healers to tell me that I should do something that my gut's been telling me to do. And instead of just trusting that in myself, inside of my body, I've just been running around trying to get that permission slip from somebody else. That's something that if you get stuck in that endless loop of always trying to do that, you really do lose your connection with your personal power. In a way, I'm grateful for everything that actually has happened. Not having personal power is really what's helped me find personal power, because it's taught me that the outer world tells me things, but it's my choice as to whether I believe those messages. And really, the most important thing is my relationship with my inner world, my relationship with my body. Does my body really want to be doing this right now? What am I feeling is most nourishing for me in this moment? And learning to say no more, to delete, to delegate, to cancel, to reschedule, to listen. And I mean truly listen to my body so that it doesn't need to scream anymore. So that I can actually hear the whispers of my body, the whispers of my wisdom. One of the ways that we take our personal power back when it comes to chronic pain and dealing with difficult sensations in the body is through consciously connecting to our inner world without judgment. I've found this to be an essential part of reorganizing neural maps in the brain and rebuilding our new normal. We can't keep distracting and numbing ourselves through this process. We have to fully experience it just as it is, just as we are. And when we view our bodies through the lens of what is wrong, we constantly get stuck in this paradigm of judgment, bias, shoulds, and preferences. There's more pain, there's more suffering. We become stuck in multiple ways. However, there's another lens through which we can view all of life, and that is sensuality. When we recognize that our body is intimately connecting us to the world, and we learn to understand its sensory language, we recognize that our sensations are important messages to us to respond to with respect, with discernment, and that they're there for us to feel fully. And when we try to skip these feeling parts, we accumulate tension patterns in the body. And I've always said, your body is your compass. There's nothing wrong with you. I've worked with people who've had numerous medical interventions and still experiencing the same symptoms that they had from the get-go, from the beginning. And as we continue diving into this work together, they realize that actually it's all about my relationship to my body, my relationship to this life, my relationship to what's happening in my inner world. So it really comes down to taking our power back and focusing on, how am I doing? Sensory fullness, flow, and clarity. Your body knows who you are. Your body knows where you're going. Your body is incredibly intelligent and wise. And yet we have learned in our culture and the medical model to only see the body as a vessel, when it is actually intelligence itself. We're trained to squash our knowing. We're trained to listen to everybody else but ourselves. And I've said this before, this learning to be a good listener is really the key to supporting everything that's happening for us in life, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. We really want to embrace it all. We want to become a better listener for ourselves. And when there's resistance to being with ourselves, that's when, we go into fight mode and flight mode. That's when we're rejecting to get to our edge, to meet the resistance, to go there with our breath, with our body, with our loving, presence. And I really believe that befriending the edges within us is how we can become a lot more comfortable with being at the edge of life, at the edge of this reality, this existence, this experience of being human, living with uncertainty day in and day out, because it really is that way. Even though we might have all these things that we place our sense of safety in, a house, family, friends, community, a job, a title, money in the bank, every day we're actually waking up and living with uncertainty because no one knows what's around the corner. No one. So we become a lot more comfortable to live with that uncertainty when we can actually befriend the edges within us. I want to talk a bit about ways that we can take our power back. Just as there are many ways that we can give our power away, there are also plenty of opportunities every day to take it back. There's so much I could say about this topic, and often in sessions with my clients, we do speak about it further in different ways. But I want to give you just a bit of insight into how I see it, and if it sparks an interest, then you can definitely dive in deeper on your own. I recognized how important it is to tap into my personal power through taking responsibility for my reality and knowing that that does not mean that I'm responsible for others. And this is something that was really hard for me because pretty much for most of my life, since I was a little girl, I truly believed that I was responsible for the well-being of everybody around me. And that's because no one was tuning into me and my needs. So I ended up tuning into everybody else's needs as a way to maintain that closeness and connection and to be needed. Being responsible or taking responsibility for other people's feelings was something that I did from a very young age. And it's been a hard thing for me to let go of this conditioning. But the awareness of it has really helped me. And I'm obviously still in practice of that, especially when it comes to really close people in my life. But I've certainly improved in that. No one, and I mean literally no other person's experience of reality is any of my business. I can be there for people. I can sit with them. I can, support them through my presence and not judge what they're actually experiencing, just simply by listening, by helping them feel seen and heard. But it's not my job to save them from what's happening. And in fact, I also need to sit with the discomfort that comes up inside of me as I witness them go through something challenging and difficult. Because when we try to rescue and save people, we're trying to control, and we're actually taking their power away as well as giving our power away. So the way we take their power away is basically by saying, I do not believe that you have enough strength in you to get through this, to work it out, that you can actually get through this period or this chapter of your life. I don't believe in that, right? That's what we do when we try to save and rescue people. And when we take responsibility for what they're experiencing, we give our power away, we deplete ourselves. We become completely energetically depleted. So by rescuing, I'm not referring to situations when people are in immediate danger and of course need to be rescued, need to have support, need to have help. I'm talking about emotional related issues. So, saving and rescuing others or playing the martyr and depleting yourself in the process. Or being the strong one so that you don't have to, face your own fears of vulnerability or deal with your own fears of vulnerability. These are situations that disconnect us from our personal power. The only thing that you can ever control is your own energy, which amounts to your personal and intrinsic power. And that means that when your spouse, your child, your friend, anyone in your life is having a challenging experience, you just practice letting go of trying to save them and instead just be by their side. Know that just your presence, your loving presence, is enough. Even the fact that you trust in their ability to figure it out without necessarily dismissing it. And of course, a lot of people are not going to like that. They're going to get angry at you. In one of my relationships, past relationships, I used to do that all the time. You're the man. You should fix it. You're the man. You should sort it out. You should take control. And I have no respect because you're not the man. And a lot of those beliefs were embedded in me because of my upbringing and the way I witnessed my parents communicate. And it was really a good experience for me to go through that suffering because it helped me recognize, the victimized little girl that I was constantly playing out and in many ways, using as in a subconscious way. Obviously, I wasn't aware of it, as my way to feel safe or to get what I want. It's always about you and not about somebody else. And this is such a hard thing to grasp. I know it was for me. And it's such a hard thing that, trigger warning, because it might trigger a lot of people out there listening to this, that it's really all about me. What is happening inside of me? Someone is pulling the trigger. Something, some event is pulling the trigger. But where is the explosion happening? It's happening inside of me. So when we allow everyone their experience, we're actually choosing to trust the flow and wisdom of life. And this is also how your relationship with life improves, how your relationship with uncertainty improves. You are the most powerful when you allow others their experience and you take complete responsibility for your own experiences. That's the super conscious state of true power, true personal power. There's been numerous incidents and times in my life where I've had chronic pain, health issues, financial issues, relationship issues, housing issues, not really knowing how I could ever get through it. And simply by taking a little bit of time to go inwards, to silence this mind chatter and the constant, need to fix and do and control. It actually happened just a few weeks ago. I've had quite a few wonderful opportunities in the last couple of months. One was, injuring my face, as I mentioned in the previous podcast episode. And then there was another thing that happened a few weeks ago where I injured my back. And I thought to myself, great. Another wonderful opportunity to really go inwards, because I could see how this conditioned victim, and some of the beliefs that I have that are really deeply wired inside of me were coming up to the surface again. And so going within, silencing the mind and taking days to just be in stillness, quiet that chatter, helped me to really start to master my thoughts, my beliefs, my emotions, and begin to understand that this is the only power and control that we ever have over our reality. And it's really the only one that's ever needed. When we master our energy through mastering our thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, we actually start to really understand what it means to tap into our personal power. As long as there's a belief that the outside world acts independently of us, we have no power. But once we remember that the outside world is a reflection of our inner world, I've said this many times, the inner reflects the outer, then we have unlimited power to change ourselves and hence, change the world or contribute to the world in a way that can create change. And this is really the grand mechanism for conscious co-creation. By taking complete responsibility for your life without self-judgment, you can easily raise your level of consciousness and in turn access greater intrinsic power. And I really love this insight and this realization because it's like, it's helped me understand that I can use my life as feedback and adjust my inner world accordingly. Because everything that happens is just feedback. And until the outside world lines up in the ways that I desire, I can constantly make, quantum jumps in evolution and spiritual wisdom. In a way, you could say that owning our power can be a shortcut to awakening and to consciousness and insight and, just living life in a way that you never thought you would. I mean, I look at my life and look at myself. Never in a million years did I ever think that I would be how I am today, who I am today, the way I think, the way I operate, and some of the beliefs that I used to carry. And I look back on them now and I think, wow, it's like I'm a completely new person. It's like I'm not even the same person I was 5 years ago, 2 years ago, even a year ago, right? It's like so much is continuously changing and evolving in the way that I think and see life and the world. And the amount of liberation and freedom that brings me internally because of this relationship that I have I guess, with growth and evolution and healing and so on. I truly believe that it's worth it. I wouldn't be sharing this stuff if I didn't believe that it's worth it. And maybe some of the things that I've shared in this episode may not make sense to some people listening, and that's okay too, because healing and growth happens in stages, happens, as we shed layers. And either way, seeds are being planted. So it's all good. To wrap up, I want to say that we take our power back when we see that we have choices, and that we can weigh the outcome of those choices without being ruled by fears, such as being, unable to manage our feelings or be with what's hard. And that there is power in expressing who we are, what we want, what we need, to express our voice, to express our truth, to tune into our intuition, to be unique, to be an individual. The other day I was reading a post by a lady in her 60s, and she was writing about everything that she has realized that she regrets, from her life, looking back. And it was really interesting because she was talking about regretting not using her voice more, regretting not believing in herself more, regretting not saying no more often, and not forgiving more people or not living in forgiveness. She was talking about not, experiencing more joy and playing more, or, learning languages and exposing herself to different creative and cultural experiences, to learn new things, to learn different things, and how she really regretted not living her life in her power, in her own personal power, focusing more on what's happening inside of her than what's expected from outside of her by others. I want to leave you guys with one of my favorite quotes, which goes, "Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power." I love this quote by Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching during, I guess, the 2nd century before Christ, many, many, many years ago. It's a little tiny book filled with immense wisdom. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're interested in working with me, please visit mentalawakening.com.au. If you have loved this episode, please subscribe and leave a review, as this will help more people to access the information shared here. Until next time, please take care. Bye for now.